All right. Lastly, today, a lot of drama with the portal. And I do think that maybe college football is changing on this a little bit. Not to go too far off subject. We'll kind of pull in some Florida State and some Florida State rivalry stuff here in a minute. But obviously, everyone has seen the Nico Iamaleava situation, which now that he's not at Tennessee, I can kind of figure out how to finally say that name.
I thought it was Amalivia.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so On3's graphics are always great. That was their best graphic of all time. Like that was, it does not get any better than that. Obviously, everybody knows the situation, so we won't need to rehash that. Do you have quick thoughts on the Nico situation?
Yeah, I think this is, I don't blame him. I mean, I think this is the new era of college football, and it gets really messy when you start getting families, and a lot of these kids have agents now. It's like the NFL. Every NFL minicamp, and you hear about players holding out because they're not happy with their contract, and they hold out for as long as they can to try and get a new deal. And more often than not, they do not get a new deal, and they come back. But with the spring transfer window opening right now, I think he decided, and what's the frustrating part for me is that a lot of these kids are still young. He's got to be, 19 years old. And, so he's probably has his parents and handlers and maybe an agent in his ear saying, no, you're worth this. You're worth this. Oh, I heard Arch Manning is getting this. You need to get what he's getting. And none of these numbers are public. And I think that's something that probably should happen. In the NFL, everyone knows what everyone's making. So holdouts make sense. You may disagree or agree with the player, but at the same time, this is not the college football we grew up with, DJ, and fans, we just have to get used to it. So I don't blame the player at all. It could have been a situation where he just got bad advice, like, Roddy Hill last year when, he left the portal and he basically said as much as he wished he had never left Florida State. These things are going to happen. And I think it's going to happen more and more often. You're going to see high-profile players, quote-unquote, holding out to try and get more money.
Quickly, I'll get back to the video, but if you are checking out any NBA playoff action, NHL playoff action, if you are interested in the NFL draft, make sure you're checking out BetUS TV. Follow them on any and all of your social media platforms that you are accustomed to. Right here on YouTube, they're on X, they're on Instagram, all the places. BetUS TV for all the very best in sports coverage. Yeah, I think, I don't necessarily have a problem with Nico trying to get more money. I do think that there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. And I'm not necessarily saying that Nico did anything wrong, but when you've got his dad interjecting and you've got I was told that on Wednesday night, there was a meeting at I think I saw this on Ari and Andy's show. He was at the offensive coordinator's house, at a team dinner or whatever, or an offensive dinner, maybe for the quarterback, or I don't know what position group or what grouping it was, but he was at a dinner. And then Thursday is when it all kind of, seems to be going south. He skips practice or Friday he skips practice, whatever, right? All this happened really quick. I think there's a right way and a wrong way to go about it. I think that it would, I don't want to attack Nico's personally or specifically because there probably were other players and factors kind of in this, but I do think that this idea of trying to publicly hold your program hostage, is something that Florida State fans are maybe somewhat familiar with. And I'm proud of Tennessee. I think that I expected Tennessee to fold here, and I expected
helps when you just brought in a 5-star quarterback as well.
For sure, yeah. But I mean, I don't know that he's gonna be ready for this year. No. With their schedule and with their returner, they were lining up for another potential playoff run. They have a schedule that's fairly manageable. And in all reality, if they go 2-1 or 1-2 against Georgia, Bama, and Florida again, which are the three better teams that they play in the SEC, I mean, they're going to make the playoff. They could potentially make the playoff at 10-2 again. So it's just, if you're Tennessee, does it make sense to pay up? Now, from a precedent standpoint, not at all. But does it make sense to? I thought they would buckle. And so I'm proud of Josh Heupel and Tennessee for not doing that. Florida State was pretty publicly. We can transition this to some FSU. So all that said, I don't blame Nico, but I do think that Tennessee did the right thing by saying nah, dog, we ain't setting this precedent where we just get bent over. Again, he's got a lot of potential, but he wasn't real. I mean, did he deserve more than $2 million a year?
You sent a message to the other 90 guys on the roster that listen,
Right. We're
we're
not
not
doing
playing
this.
these games. We're not putting up with it. Um, I think, one of the biggest frustrations I had, even though, he was solid last year, but when Lundy transferred to Colorado and you brought him right back, I know there was a need at the linebacker position, but I just think that sent a bad message to the rest of Florida State's roster.
I did too. Yeah, you ended up striking out so much at linebacker, and you had to but you had to circle back on him. You paid him way more than, Lundy. From what I remember and was told, and hopefully I'm not quoting this terribly wrong. You ended up paying him more to get him back from Colorado than he originally asked for to stay at Florida State. Like when he jumped in the portal in December, he asked for X, and when to get him back from Colorado, you paid him X plus, and then didn't get great play out of him and went 2-10 anyway. So was it worth it? Clearly not. Obviously at that time, Florida State didn't know they were going to embark on the worst season through most of our lives, but you had others, whether it be Farmer or Peyton or just whomever, who literally jumped in the portal, jumped in the portal. There were times that some of those guys were doing that behind closed doors that you never even saw, going back to, I'm talking spring of 23, at the spring game. We had guys that we were thinking I spoke with people while at that spring game that we were thinking might jump in the portal, might leave. And, that's just, I think Florida State has very much changed the way that they view this and the way that they do this. And I don't think they're going to play those games any longer. I don't think I think Mike has very much changed his stance on this, and good for him. I don't think there's anyone, when you think about it, like, first of all, I don't know if there's anybody on this roster that I'm like, is there anybody on this roster, Richie, that if they jumped in the portal, you would just be devastated over? I just don't think there is, right? There'd be guys you wouldn't like it, but there's nobody right now that I'd just be like, oh my God, I'm going to kill, like maybe you would have 2 years ago, like if Jordan would have jumped in or something like that.
Yeah. Like, it's not like you have a Jameis Winston after winning the Heisman. Every school in the country would have been tampering, trying to get him. I think he would have stayed at Florida State, but if he had hopped in the portal, yeah, that would have been devastating. There's nobody on this roster. Jackson, obviously, I really like his potential, but he did not play great last year. So
Right.
if he were to leave, it's a hit to the depth on the defensive line, but at the same time, what are you really losing? And, I think that's also a testament to what Mike needs to do in terms of, managing his roster, because at Florida State, you should have at least 5 or 6 guys that if they opt in the portal, you're like, dang, what happened?
Yeah, no, I agree. And so I think Mike has changed his stance on that. Shoot, I even heard, listen, as much crap as we give them, as much as we want them to be terrible, even Mario kind of learned his lesson. You remember it's funny, I watched a lot of Miami fans chime in on this whole Nico situation, like, oh, wow, like we would never. They literally had this happen with Van Dyke 2 years ago, coming off the 22 season when he held them hostage and threatened to go to Bama and had to re-release a statement. I'm here. And they paid him more money through the collective and everything else. But I think Mario's learned that lesson. And I think it's good for college football. Mario came out after their spring game yesterday and basically was like, look, if somebody wants to do that, like they can go find some other place down the road. And I like this shift for college football. I like how coaches and people at programs are saying like, no, we ain't going to do this. We ain't going to play this game where you come back to us 4 times a year to try and renegotiate your deal or try and hold us hostage for more money. And look, I don't like Mario. I don't like Miami, but good. I hope all of college football does this because it's just an asinine place that we live in. Now, somebody's going to pick up Nico and somebody's going to have him. Maybe it's USC, maybe it's Ohio State, maybe it's Oregon. I don't know. Somebody's going to do it. Somebody who is kind of a quarterback away is going to do this. And that's fine. But Nico's leverage is gone, right? It would not surprise me at all if Nico made less this year because what's he going to, right now he needs a home, right? And maybe there's a bidding war and maybe he makes more. I don't know. But I do think that there's a situation now where he's no longer on Tennessee's roster. They've moved on. And so he needs a home, right? And every day that we get closer to August is a day we get closer to, him not having a home. Now he's going to land somewhere. And so I would like if coaches kind of got together, and you're always going to have some coaches that are more desperate or some programs that are more desperate and they're going to take a flyer on a guy because their back's up against the wall. But I would like to get into a situation where coaches kind of band together almost somewhat, and they're like, no, we're not going to play these games. If you want to jump in the portal's there for you to jump in. Nico could have very easily gone about this the right way, not made this kind of big public dispute, not had his dad's going on social media, calling people out and cussing them out for reporting on the truth. He could have entered the portal in December. He could have made his intentions known pre-spring and not done this the day before their spring game. There are people, Richie, obviously, that are not as locked into this stuff and searching it every second of the day like we are. There were people that showed up to Tennessee's spring game unaware that he wasn't on the team anymore, right? Like, and not everyone, right? Most people knew. That's insane. That's an insane part of college football that we're into right now, and not the craziest part of college football by any means, but that's stupid. Like, that should not be the case. There should be no situation where you go to a spring game and your starting quarterback, the most recognizable player on your team, one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC, one of the quarterbacks with the most potential in the SEC, a 5-star, you didn't know that he wasn't on your roster the day before. If Nico wanted to go in the portal, that'd be totally fine. Go in December, do things the right way. Don't hold your team hostage. And I'm glad that other coaches are stepping up and basically saying, like, they're not calling Nico out, but even Mario stepping up and saying, like, nah, we ain't playing that game here. You want to come to Miami? Great. Come to Miami, play football. We're going to try and win games. We might not call our timeouts. We might do things stupid, whatever. We might overpay him, which Mario did just overpay a quarterback, in my opinion. But this whole game of like holding us hostage, like, you ain't doing that here. And again, I don't really care what other programs do. I certainly am glad that I feel like that's kind of the way that Norvell is wired now. Like, we ain't playing those games anymore. He's made statements about it. But for the sake of college football in general, yeah, would I love all of Florida's players, all of Miami's players to hold them hostage and screw them over? Sure. But just for the love of college football, I hope that this starts to curb that. I hope that we start to get away from that happening in college football, because it is absolutely asinine to me. And again, I mean, my ultimate goal, I don't really care about Nico pro or con, like, whatever. He can have a great year, he can have a bad year. It doesn't really impact me too much. I hope he makes less. I hope he makes less at whatever school he's going to than he would have made at Tennessee, and it becomes public and it curbs this from happening too much in the future, because this is stupid.
Yeah, and there's so much going on here, right? So much to unpack, because you got to think he's probably asking around, because a lot of these, college quarterbacks, they've went to the Elite 11 together, right? And a lot of these kids, quite frankly, they would lie about how much money they're making in NIL, and you hear a number and you're like, oh crap, I'm not making anywhere near that. I'm worth more. And maybe the guy told you he's making $4 million when he's making 1.5.
Yeah.
I'm sure. To your point, I hope that these college coaches, as a whole, collectively adopt the NFL, NBA mentality. When a player in the NBA demands a trade, you hear that more in the NBA than any sport. They're like, no, we're not trading. Like, we're just not doing it. Like occasionally they'll do it if they can get the right pieces, but they just say no. Like, they ignore it because what are you going to have players demanding trades every 6 weeks? Same thing when it comes to holdouts. Again, very rarely does a holdout end with a player getting a new contract. They simply come back because you're under contract. There is nothing else to do. If I were a head coach, my policy would be, listen, if you want to enter the portal, best of luck to you. But once you officially are in the portal, don't call me to come back here. You've made your decision. You've left this team because you think you either deserve more playing time than you're getting, or you deserve more money than you're getting. So I don't want that type of athlete on my team. And I know that's hypocritical to say because we take a lot of transfers, but most of the transfers we take are typically from smaller schools. It's, like a coach taking a job promotion. We have a lot of kids at a lot of schools, not just Florida State, where they think, and again, I think the biggest problem, just going back to circle this thing around, is parents, agents, and handlers. They're in these kids' ears, and a lot of these parents, they just see dollar signs, and that, I'm sure they want what's best for their kid, but they figure if I can make a buck off it too, why not?
Sometimes you mess around and find out, right? We'll keep it G-rated since it's the Lord's Day, but sometimes you mess around and find out. Sometimes and there's nothing wrong. Again, there's nothing wrong with jumping in the portal. Like, if that is every kid's prerogative, like, I've got no problem with that. There's no problem for jumping in the portal just for more money. Like, I've got no issues with that at all. A lot of guys do that all over the country. Like, do you think that, and I don't even think he made like an insane amount of money here, but like, do you think Jared Verse could have made the NIL money or the future NFL money if he'd have stayed at Albany? No, of course not, right? I got no problem with a kid jumping in the portal for any reason. I don't care if a kid goes to a smaller school that can just afford to pay him more. If Brock, for whatever reason, said, you know what, I could make twice as much at USF because I could be their starter, go do it. I have no problem. I don't care about that at all. Do what's best for you. If somebody offered me 5 times what I was making to cover Akron, I would do it. You know, I'd still cheer for Florida State, but I would do it. I do an Akron podcast. I got no problems with that. The problem is the way you handle it, the way you do things, the way you go about things the right way. And hopefully with this situation, we will get more of that in college football. So